Okay, thanks everybody. It's noon. And so I think I'm just gonna have us just get started. I'm gonna have this recorded so people can join as they come. And if you missed part of it, you can always reference the recording. I want to start by not yet thanking Alexis, but thanking the districts and the NRCS and FSA, so the Natural Resource Conservation Service and the Farm Service Agency, subsidiaries of the USDA branch, who make Women, Land, and Legacy possible. We also want to thank Alexis, of course, for her time. She is from Greene County, Iowa, farms there with her family, has a new career post extension where she was last year when she joined us for this talk. Alexis, I want to let you know this was probably the most popular webinar we had last year on farm economics. We
Wow.
loved having you as a speaker. And so, yes, I've asked you back this year. I think we recruited you immediately after you talked and booked you for this year. It was so popular. So with our limited time, and I'm sure there's a ton to talk about with all the changes. I know we've had so many program changes, both on the natural resource conservation side, so cost share programs for conservation, and also like the CRP program that the Farm Service Agency manages. We've had a ton of changes. Obviously, everyone knows there's tons of things constantly going on with the farm economy. And so I'm going to let you just get started.
All right. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I enjoy having the opportunity to speak to people, especially to women in agriculture. It's kind of the most fun I can have. So I'm going to share my screen, and I am working with a new computer. So I apologize for things that maybe go a little wonky, but hopefully everything will work. And if they don't, Jenna, can you just jump in and be like, hey, Alexis, there's a problem. So I'm going to talk about the 2026 farm economics, and it's really global forces, but local realities that we are seeing. And I even want to make this even more broad focus of what are we going to do for the next 10 years to ensure that we are still farming. So real quick, just going to leave this right here. This is the company that I work for, Momentous Family Office. So a little housekeeping there, and I'll tell you a little bit more about them if we have time at the end. So who am I? I'm Alexis Stevens, and yes, I was with Iowa State University Extension and Outreach for about 5 years in farm management. And that really has a lot to do with the economics of agriculture, done a lot with women in ag. But over the summer, I had some career transitions in the last year, and I landed with Momentous Family Office, and I am the director of their farming operations. They have about 12,000 acres in Nebraska and needed a dedicated farm manager for that. But I am from Greene County, kind of born in Ames, but raised in Greene County. And I still farm there with my dad and my cousins, and we have cattle and row crops. And so I'm also from Jefferson, and Jefferson, I have my husband, and we have 10 children, but most of them are in college now. So just dive right into it. And I think a lot of you are just going to be nodding your head. Yep, that's exactly how we feel. There's a disconnect between the agricultural economy and the rest of the economy. So agriculture, we're looking at 4 consecutive years of declining farm profitability, but at the same time, then we're hearing about how gold is at an all-time high. And when we say all-time high, like yesterday, I went into the jewelry box and I pulled out all my gold jewelry, and I'm like, I think we might have like maybe $10,000 here. Like we should weigh this and figure out how much it costs. Gold is really at this all-time high. Bitcoin was soaring, silver's rallying. And then in agriculture, we're like, oh, I can't pay off the operating loan this year. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. And even in farmland, which is a place where we would normally park our money, a safe place in an economy with volatility, unless you're looking at that really high quality farmland, even farmland isn't like soaring like it was. And when we look at the economy, I tell people wherever the ag economy is, that's probably where the rest of the economy will be in the next year to 18 months. So if ag's in the toilet, everything else is going to go down there. But as ag comes back up, ag will improve before the rest of the economy, and then we'll bring everybody with us. So what we have in our economy right now is kind of known as the debasement trade. It's where people have really easy money. The high interest rates helped investors to have a lot of extra cash, and they want to park it someplace that feels safe, someplace that's a hard asset. And what feels safe to them right now is gold, silver, metals, things that move the AI systems forward. So farmland and food is a tangible asset, and I would argue it's more tangible than gold unless you're hiding it in your jewelry box. I can actually hold on to it. But the debasement trade is parking their extra cash into things that don't feed people right now. So we produce that ultimate hard asset, but we're in this paper asset bubble. And if you look at that slide over there, you can see that we didn't really get invited to this economic boom. And that's showing you corn down there as corn continues to go down. And oh my gosh, what happened in the last 24 hours with corn? My chart needs to scoot down a little bit further. So volatility, not going to be a surprise to any of you. Volatility is the new norm, whether that's in weather, and we see extreme weather events. We see flash floods and flash droughts. Flash drought was a new one for me, but one county's flooding, the other one's in a drought. That volatility in the weather that really affects our trade in agriculture, that's looking like it's the new norm for a while. We're also seeing volatility in the markets. And so what you see is a really fast rally. We saw this in November in soybeans. The president said, I've made this trade truce. I wouldn't call it necessarily an agreement, but a truce with China. They're going to buy X amount of soybeans. And we saw the soybean market go way up really fast, and it came back down just as quickly. And that is what we're going to see. And I think really for the rest of this decade, if not longer, is up and down volatility, and especially coming from policy. So speaking of policy, it's not neutral. I was saying before we started the webinar, if we could all just be quiet in Washington for just a few minutes, so I don't have to completely change all of my charts and change my slides, because things are changing so quickly in agriculture. The president makes an offhand comment about buying cattle from Argentina, and the cattle market tanks. The president makes an offhand comment that we're going to sell X amount of soybeans to China. The soybean market all of a sudden takes off. But those comments don't necessarily lead to permanent policies. And so those comments kind of give us these trade shocks where it's going to hit the ag market first, and it hits it the hardest. And we just see these swinging up and down markets. That's going to become the norm. And I will give you some tips and tools on how to get through that, not just in agriculture, but in any business. So when we have policy volatility, we then have price volatility as well. So our reality is we have had high inflation. High inflation is great if you are a landowner or a hard asset owner who wants to make their balance sheet look better. So if you own anything, you saw maybe the value of your house has doubled. But at the same time, if you're a borrower for any reason, in agriculture, we tend to be borrowers. If you are a renter or you have an operating loan, we saw that huge increase in expense with inflation and with the interest rates. So it depends on where you sit. If you're a big landowner, you're great. But if you're the small farmer, a couple hundred acres, or you're the beginning farmer, the inflation hedge of putting your money in that hard asset isn't going to work for you because you've been priced out of the market. So in the next decade or so, risk management is what's really going to matter. Yield gains, those are going to happen. Everyone is going to have yield gains. We have all of the different seed companies and co-ops trying to find ways for us to increase our yield. And at the same time, we've got that going on in South America. All across the world, everyone is increasing their yields. That's not how we're going to make the moves and how we're going to survive. In the next decade, the ones that survive are the ones who stay liquid, which means you've got working capital. You are able to weather those price swings. You're able to make disciplined decisions, especially in your marketing. You're able to move on deals when they come up. So, big example of this one. In September, this is my personal example, but I heard this from a lot of farmers across the country. In September, we have our crop insurance due. We have our taxes due. We have probably regular insurance due. A lot of us have rent due. And we don't have very much money left over because we've spent it all throughout the year. So as soon as we harvested soybeans in September, we thought, well, it's never going to go up any higher. I really need some cash right now. I'm going to sell all my beans right now to generate cash. And I'll just accept what happens because I don't think it's going to get any better. So we did that. We paid off the bills. Well, then we have that trade truce with China right around Thanksgiving, and that soybean market took off. So here I'd sold all my soybeans at $9.50, and now I could sell them at $11.50. I called my cousin up. I said, "Do we have any more beans?" And he goes, "Boy, I wish we did." But we sold them all because we had bills to pay and we needed some working capital. So had we planned better for that, had we had that working capital and had cash on hand to be able to make those payments, we could have held on until that rally. And that rally was really fast. And I mean, it was just a matter of days and it had come back down. So again, being liquid, being flexible, being disciplined, and not also just selling into a rally because we saw a rally or selling because, oh my gosh, I just think the market's going to go down further. So I'm just going to sell it all before it gets any worse. Having a marketing plan and being very disciplined with that, but being flexible as you need to. What we see in agriculture right now is a structural shift in who is dominating the ag space. Traditionally, that had been the United States. And when you look at my charts there, those are from the WASDE yesterday. The one on the left shows you corn production. And we are still the dominant space for corn production. The United States produces more corn than any other one country. And you could combine quite a few of those. We are dominating in corn. When you look at soybeans, we are not dominating in soybeans. Brazil produces more beans than us. And here's the thing that Brazil does better than us, not just in production, but they do it at a cheaper price. We have regulated ourselves into a point where our cost of production is incredibly high. And so Brazil can produce cheaper beans than us. They have 2 crop seasons, which is something that we don't have in most of the United States. They are able to make trade deals with other countries that we cannot make. And so even when our beans are cheaper, China would rather go to Brazil and buy expensive beans from Brazil. And that's a personality thing between China and the United States and our leaders, but it's also that China has invested a significant amount of money into South America to ensure that they have somewhere else that they can go and have a trusted trade partner with. Looking not just at corn and soybeans, but looking at all areas of ag production, other countries are able to do things cheaper than we can. Their labor is cheaper. Their safety standards are probably questionable. Their machinery and equipment maybe not something that would pass OSHA standards here in the US, or not something that I would necessarily want to work in, but that's their environment. And so they are able to do things cheaper than us and then produce more than us. They take advantage of those weather situations that where we have one growing season, most of them have multiple growing seasons. So California has typically been the specialty crop king of the world. Blueberries, fruits, vegetables, that sort of thing, that has been California's niche. Well, what we're seeing now is Peru, which is a country we don't think of very often unless we're thinking about Paddington Bear, maybe. Peru will soon overtake California in several specialty crops, including blueberries. In the next 3 to 5 years, Peru will produce more than California because their environment is such that those regulations and the cost of labor and the cost of doing business is just cheaper for them. We've got all of these geopolitical fragmentations going on where we've kind of separated the world into Trump's area, which is North and South America. Putin's got his area over there in Europe and in the Russia area. And then Xi really exerts his control over Asia and Africa. And what you're seeing right now, especially with President Trump making, those offhand comments like we're going to own Greenland or things like that, is these three men saying, not in my backyard, stay out of my backyard. This is my area, you stay in your area. And those policy and those comments trickle down into agriculture, which is just kind of an easy punching bag for them to have their arguments that they have. And this is another one that I have been talking about for, I think, for 5 years, and I feel like I'm almost screaming at a brick wall. Demand and supply. The chart you see there on the right is the soybean supply and demand. This is the most recent one that came out from the WASDE, the World Agricultural Supply and Demand information. And this information that we're getting from the USDA is saying that we have an incredible amount of supply. We are overproducing significant amounts in every single commodity. We are producing too many soybeans. We are producing too much corn. But when I tell a farmer that the only solution to an oversupply is either to reduce supply or increase demand, no farmer wants to cut the number of acres. Nobody wants to let that land just sit empty because there's no income from that. So we have to increase demand if we aren't willing to decrease supply. And decreasing supply really is a lot harder than it sounds, because war in Ukraine didn't decrease grain supplies. Derechos and 4 years of drought really didn't decrease supplies. We need a worldwide multi-year weather event to decrease supplies. The demand side of things used to be China. China is the one who's going to buy all of our soybeans. China is going to buy all of this from us. China is a huge country with a lot of people to feed. Well, that's not the reality anymore. The reality is that China's population is peaking and will start to shrink. They have made huge investments in other countries so that they do not have to rely on the US as a trade partner. So that China demand has plateaued. So then we're looking for, where are other places that we can get some demand? Ethanol was a great option for corn. I think someone has their mic on, so if you could go ahead and mute, that would be great.
I gotta make phone calls on my own, but
See if we can get him to mute there. Okay. So ethanol has been a great option for using up that corn supply. That is why we don't have corn that is still at a $2 corn like it was 20 and 30 years ago. However, the long-term role of ethanol, while it is still a great option, it is not using up enough. We are going to keep producing more and more and more. So we need other places that we can create demand. When we look at trade policy on the global level, the USDA, Brooke Rollins, we're looking at other countries. We're looking at increasing demand in Mexico, which is a great trade partner for us, always has been. I think there's been some mention of India, which there are a lot of people there, but doing business in India is tricky and it's a ways off before we create that demand. Another one I think I was on here last year saying, well, we're going to have renewable aviation fuel. 45Z is going to be the saving grace, and that's going to use up all of the corn that we produce and more. It's amazing. Well, we had a change in leadership. We've had a change in policy. We've had a change in focus. And while that renewable aviation fuel isn't completely dead in the water, we do not have the demand for that. And that's really worldwide. Companies are looking at tightening their belt and saying, okay, well, we like the idea of renewable fuels. We like the idea of green energy, but right now, our bottom line in making money, or at least surviving as a company, is more important than the environment to us. And so that's signaling to the market, this is not your savior. So I wish I could come on here and tell you this amazing thing is what will use up all of our corn or all of our soybeans, and we'll see $7 corn, we'll see $15 beans again. And if I make the prediction that we won't, maybe it'll actually happen, but I just don't see that happening until we come up with some other way to use this massive supply that we have. And the USDA showing us that we have more and more and more, and every time they come out with a report, they increase it. We either use it up somehow, we produce less, or we accept the lower price and figure out how to manage through the lower price times. Iowa specific. Here's the corn supply and demand. If you paid attention to what the USDA put out yesterday with the WASDE, you saw them increase how many acres, not just how many acres that they anticipate that we harvested and planted, they increased the bushels per acre for last year. And we were all expecting that they were going to tell us that they were going to reduce the yield. We expected that we produced less corn in 2025. And the USDA says, no, actually, you produced a lot more than you did. And what happened there was the markets, they just tanked. And they're still going down. And I'm not going to look anymore because it's not part of my marketing plan to sell corn at $4.20. And so I'm not going to worry about it for a while because I expect it'll swing back up another time. But even though we are oversupplied in corn, even though the cost of production for corn continues to be higher than soybeans, in Iowa, we anticipate that corn is king, and the acreage decisions is that we are going to plant corn again. We're going to plant a lot of it. The USDA is saying, yep, that's exactly what we anticipate. We also expect that you will have higher yields. When we look at that, what came out of 2025, it's not that we necessarily had a better year because our yield was down, but we harvested more of that. So a lot of times we would chop things for silage. There was a lot less of that going on. We had fewer cattle to feed, and so we just harvested more of the corn than when we normally send it into the marketplace in some other way. So they lowered the average market price, and we're now down to $4.10, and kind of back where we were a year ago, and watching that seasonal average price come down. It's very frustrating. But again, the only solution is more demand or lower the supply. The soybean crush market is keeping our soybeans higher than the export competition says that it should. So when we look at soybean exports, typically we export quite a bit to China. Not this time of year. Normally that's done before we get to January. And when we look at how much we've actually exported to China in this marketing season, it's about half of what we normally do. So the soybean crush market makes things look better than the export markets right now. Basis in your marketing plan is one of those things that you actually have some control over. And this is where, if you execute well and use basis to your advantage, this is where you will be able to make some money and find some profitability. So for those of you who don't know what basis is, this is the difference between the price on the board, so the Chicago Board of Trade's price that you hear, and the local price that you actually sell your grain for. So sometimes that's less, and sometimes that's more than the board price. But it changes at every different elevator. It changes throughout the year based off of how much they want your grain or don't want your grain. Feed mills will be higher. Ethanol plants and crushers will be higher than your local co-op who's only just moving that grain to another place. So if you can shop around for basis, you can't do anything about that price from the Board of Trade. That's just what it is. But you can shop around for that basis price. You can look at when you deliver and see if you can deliver your grain at a different time. You can look at who you deliver to. And some of us are very lucky that we have several options in the area. I think Carroll, Iowa, Templeton, Iowa specifically is just this amazing place where they have about 30 different options that are all within really close driving range that they could truck their grain to. And the basis will swing 40 to 50 cents, even in corn, in those different areas. So that's some place where you can find an extra dime, an extra 25 cents. And then real briefly, the fertilizer cost realities. It doesn't get any cheaper. If you can do things to reduce your fertilizer without reducing your yield, and working with an agronomist, and Iowa State University has a great decision-making tool, and their agronomists are great at helping you figure out exactly where you can reduce that fertilizer, those inputs, and not reduce the yield and make those decisions. Those are those Iowa-specific things that you can do something about. We can't do anything about those global decisions, but the basis and your input costs and how much you put on the field is something that you have a lot of control over. Looking at cattle, and this is one we hear about a lot in the news. I'm so happy that the cattle farmers finally got their chance to make some money, because they really didn't for a long time. And when I was in cattle personally, I got out of that just because I was tired of losing money. And that's exactly how I framed it. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired of losing money. Well, I should have held out for another 10 years because they're doing great. That is because they reduced their supply, whether that was through drought, intention, disease, whatever it was, their supply reduced significantly. Therefore, the price goes up. That was really hard on the cattle farmers. So when we think, well, we'll just reduce supply in corn and soybeans, now think about how many people got out of the cattle business in the last 50 years as they reduce that supply. And it's going to take a long time to build that up. We can't just, grow a cow to market weight in a matter of days or months. This is a years long process. And so when the president says he's going to bring beef prices down, and then somebody needs to tell him, well, you can't just create a steer that's ready for market today. You can't bring prices down today. And then when he's mentioning, well, we're going to go to other countries to get that. Well, what that does, that policy volatility then causes volatility in the cattle market. And the cattle farmers kind of had that deer in the headlights look, like, why would you say that? So it's a tricky business of we want to support the cattle farmers. And at the same time, I don't want to pay $6 or $7 or $10 a pound for beef. But apparently, doesn't matter how high the price of beef gets, we really aren't seeing a lot of decrease in consumer demand for beef. Beef is that protein that when you finally make some money, that's when you're moving into beef. And I remember somebody telling me once, well, you're going to have to eat crickets because that's the way the world is going, and we're all going to eat crickets. And I have tried a cricket, in case our cricket farmer from Iowa is on here, and I did like the crickets, but look, I'm eating steak. If I can afford it, I'm going to eat steak. And that, I think, is where our national sentiment is right now. So there's still a lag between the retail and the farm gate. We have New World screwworm, and that is right on the edge. It's right there in Mexico. It is not that far away. This is a horrible disease. It's basically a flesh-eating disease. We do not want New World screwworm in our country. And I think the fear is that in the president and Brooke Rollins' desire to bring beef prices down for consumers, that they might overlook the necessity of keeping that disease out of our country at the same time and reduce some of that regulation. We do not want that in our herd. And so if you are a voice in agriculture and you are able to get the ear of policymakers and decision makers, telling them that, yes, we don't like high consumer prices, but at the same time, we don't want to lose our entire cattle herd because that will drive the price up, make smart, informed decisions. In the hog market, hog farmers, you are amazingly efficient. I love how you have really changed hog feeding over the last few decades. Your efficiency at reducing cost and at the same time producing bigger and better hogs masks the fact that the margins in hog farming is weak. So you have this feeling like, oh, I'm so busy, but I'm not making a lot of money. Why is hogs not the savior that it was supposed to be, like they said in the 90s? A lot of that comes from that export dependence. We do export a lot of hogs, but then when we start to look at the demand for that across the world, China used to be a huge producer of hogs, and the demand there for ours shifted to where they produce their own. Now, China is now looking at reducing their herd by the same size of our herd. So imagine taking every single hog in the United States and getting rid of them and taking them out of the market. So China doesn't have the demand for hogs that was there in don't anticipate that they will in the future. And again, that's another reason why we see our corn and soybeans, especially those prices, getting lower and lower. There's no demand to grow the hog market in China anymore. Interest rates. Operating loans, this chart, I had ChatGPT make this chart, and I should have told him to make it like scary or something, because I don't think it was a very good, it's not a great visual of that, but because it shows, it looks like corn prices are high and your interest rates aren't that high. But the reality is I almost want to flip these two charts around. Interest rates, while they have come down, have not come back down to where they were at our extremely low points. And the president talks about wanting to bring interest rates down. And meanwhile, the Fed chairman apparently doesn't, and they're having their little fight that seems to happen in politics a lot lately. But the interest rates are so high, especially for those of us who have operating loans, that we aren't able to weather those price swings, especially the ones that we see in corn. So we have that operating loan pressure where the bank says maybe they want you to pay off that whole operating loan and you can't. And so you're selling in a lower market to generate cash when you need it. Interest rates have been good for land owners who are trying to boost their portfolio and their assets. It has not been great for those of us who might want to buy land, or for those of us who need to sell land and don't want to do it to an investor. It has held our land values up in agriculture. And although we have seen them kind of come down off of the high that we had a few years ago, they are still extremely high. They are above market production. So if you buy the land, you are not able to produce corn and soybeans at a high enough price to cover the cost of buying that land. And they're sticky. They really don't like to come back down once they go up. And it's especially sticky with that high value land, and that's where we see the investors parking their money. Rent is also something that is sticky at the top. Unfortunately, once we get rent up to a higher price, it's hard to get the landowner to come back down. Rent is almost always looking in the rear view mirror unless it's tied to the cost of production in some sort of flex lease. So that cash rent, while it has come down a little bit, is still incredibly high compared to where our grain prices are. So the reality is you need liquidity over acres right now. So don't get bigger. Have more free cash on hand to be able to pay the bills, to be able to make moves in the market or make moves on your farmland that are calculated, that you can do quickly, and that you don't have to worry about as much. And I gave you that example of the beans in September, where we sold our beans at $9.50 because we needed the cash, and then regretted it in November when the beans had that short rally. It's okay, guys, because we do have the Farm Bill as a safety net, right? I don't remember, when was the last time we actually had the Farm Bill? Was it 2018?
2018. Yep, 2018, and it's been expired for some time now. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's no Farm Bill. And I really appreciate everyone at USDA and the FSA office who are helping us to get through this when we have these ad hoc payments. We have MFP. I got one yesterday that was for 23 and 24 that was a shallow loss, and we'll get the Farmer Bridge assistance in February. And what I hear from people at FSA is they tell us we're going to do this, but they haven't told us how to do it. And then they get the guidance, and then they have to figure out how to roll that out. So I really want to give a lot of grace to everyone in USDA, not just in the FSA office, but across the board. They are working incredibly hard with probably half the staff is what they had in 2018. So when they come out with their reports and you think they hate you, just know that these people are working with, they're working overtime with a smaller budget, with fewer people, and with the data that is available to them. But instead of a farm bill, what we see is we have ad hoc payments, and these payments just come here and there. Typically, they're going to get announced sometime in the late summer or fall, and then actually getting payments in sometime in January, February, March timeframe. It takes time for them to roll these things out. And the policymakers who are looking at reelection are going to make these comments and these ideas that they have in a time that makes you want to vote for them. So plan for some chaos, plan for uncertainty. Again, that's having that liquidity. I know when we're trying to figure out our budget or we're trying to plan for the next year, I don't know, am I going to get $50 from USDA or am I going to get nothing? Am I going to have to go back and amend my tax returns because I got a payment for 23 in 26? We have to plan for that uncertainty. So like I've mentioned this over and over, this cycle really does not reward size. Bigger and better, that's been the guiding light for probably my entire life in agriculture. Right now, it's going to require liquidity. That's who's going to get the reward. And it's going to reward people with discipline. So how do I get some working capital? Because I can't really get the fertilizer people to change their price. And I can't really get the John Deere to just, give me a huge discount. We kind of are stuck in a lot of places. We're the price taker on our inputs and on what we produce. I can't really do a whole lot about the market besides basis. The one that I have some actual control over is my cost of production and the cost of my land rent. This is a hard sell for a lot of landowners to ask them to structure a lease that's based off of your cost of production. So how much does it cost me and what's my profitability? And that's something that we do at Momentous Family Office. We have a floor. No matter what, my landowner will get $250 per acre because he has to be able to pay the taxes, insurance. He has expenses, right? But after that, we ask the farmer to look at their cost of production and they get the first $100 of profitability. So then that basically makes that land price almost $350. They get that $100. Anything after that $100 of profitability, if there's anything left, then we split it 50-50. The way that has worked this year is most of our tenants have not had to pay any bonus. And I think, if we get a bonus off of that 12,000 acres, it might be about $10,000 worth of bonus. Capital discipline. It's not the time to buy a new combine. We knew that. It's time to really look at, why am I making this decision? Does this decision fit? Is there a better option? That's the same thing also with your inputs. Do I need this much fertilizer? Do I need this second pass of fungicide? And on that one, I really wish that I had done that second pass with Southern Rust, because that hurt me a lot. But having that discipline and making those decisions, making informed decisions, and then selling into those rallies. So that means you have to have some money to get you to that when that next rally is. You have to be paying attention to the market, but I do not want you to be a slave to the market. So my advice there, and you don't have to take it, you don't need all these crazy hedges and puts and calls. Call wherever you sell your grain, pick a reasonable number that is above your cost of production that we think that the market might get to. So that might be $4.50 for corn, might be $4.85. A reasonable number, it's not $7. You tell them, I want to put in an offer, and they do that. It's free. You put in the offer, and then if that hits, and typically that happens overnight, you've told them how many bushels you want to sell. You didn't even have to worry about it. The computer's doing it all for you. So that's my advice for you on how to get through these cycles. Use AI tools to your advantage. I know a lot of us are not comfortable with them. They are evolving. Whatever tool you have now, this is the worst AI tool you will ever have. They are evolving. They are getting better. I'm working with technology companies to try to develop some AI tools that help the farmer specifically, and help you, the farmer, make money. I'm not interested in co-ops making money or John Deere making money. I shouldn't pick on them. Whatever color tractor, I don't care about them. I want you to make money. Using precision ag to make decisions, making informed decisions, really learning about your farm. And then if you're worried about data ownership and cybersecurity, when you're looking at those tools, use a trusted partner. So if your co-op trusts them, they've probably vetted them, they have a lot at stake. Don't just go on the internet and search ag AI tools, because you are likely to get a lot of junk. There are probably tens of thousands of tools out there. Real quick about carbon markets. I really was hopeful, this is probably 4 years ago, that the carbon markets were going to be something that could help us to generate some revenue in agriculture. We get paid to make stewardship changes. We do great things for the environment, and we get money. There is a lot of global demand for that. The reality is that a lot of the way our carbon markets in the United States has been structured, we are not able to participate in the global carbon markets. The money that we think is here one day may not be here the next day, that we were dependent on that income, and that's a lot due to policy changes and changes in our government. Sometimes those cost share, the reality of being able to work in that cost share is just beyond what we can do, and the economics don't cover the cost of that. Work with NRCS. Other good partners are Practical Farmers of Iowa and the Soil and Water Conservation Districts. They have programs. Work with them, work with people that you trust and that you know, to help you make those informed decisions. They can be very long-term commitments, and that may not be something that you want to have happen. I had one person tell me, whatever you do, don't accidentally sell your carbon for $10 an acre. And I almost did. It's worth a lot more than that. So maybe these will pan out and change, but right now, again, not the cash cow. So practical strategies, a marketing philosophy for 2026, put in offers, know your cost of production, and try to sell above that cost of production. If you don't know your numbers, you're only going to be reactive and you are not going to survive. Work with Iowa State University and their farm management specialists. Ag Decision Maker is full of great tools that can help you to make decisions, learning tools. AI can be really helpful with this as well. We strongly feel in Momentous Family Office that regeneration of the soil, water, land, and our mental health is important and required for survival. So making those changes so that you are still farming great soil 100 years from now, start thinking about what your grandkids and your great grandkids will inherit and make changes that way. Diversification is really important. We cannot park everything in one or two crops, because those one or two crops are going to have market swings. We need to have other places where we can get some capital. Have that budget, make it a really strong budget, and try to cut your risk, whether that's through crop insurance or market risk, whatever you can do to cut risk. In this environment, and this is for all business, not just for agriculture, you don't have to outrun everyone, you just have to stay standing. So we've kind of gotten forgotten in this easy money and this debasement trade and quantitative easing that we're seeing. Agriculture isn't really getting to play in that space, but we will. This will be reflected on our balance sheets. Agriculture is going to start to improve over the next few years. Position yourself right now so that you can make those moves. As we see other farmers saying, I've had enough of this, and start to retire in their 50s and 60s versus holding out until they die. Be able to make that move if you want to be able to pick up the farmland, pick up the operation. Change yourself from being a price taker to a risk manager. Your resilience will come through adaptation. In the world of AI, in the world that we are moving into, if you do not change, if you are not willing to make changes to your practices, you will get left behind. So I real quick want to take a minute to explain what we're doing at Momentous Family Office, because I am so excited about this. They brought me on in August. They have this amazing vision for not just our land or Nebraska, but the entire world, that we could be a beacon for what is possible for restoring health and healing to the land, water, and community. But at the same time, as we transition 100% of our acres into regenerative practices, we are going to do that in a way that supports our tenants. Because my landowner, who's Omani, or also known as Ron Carson, has plenty of money. He has the ability to put cover crops on all of his acres and not even miss it. It would be a rounding error. But he doesn't want to do that. He wants to do it in such a way that other people can say, okay, I can do that too. I don't have to have tons of money, because these farmers did it. These everyday farmers were able to do that. And so we support those farmers through making that transition. And what we did to make that transition in the fall of 2025, very aggressive. We put in 2,000 acres of cover crops, and no cover crops before on any of our fields. So 2,000 acres of cover crops, and we'll probably have probably 6,000 acres of cover crops next year. We have 4,000 acres in no-till management, and a lot of those, because we're in the highly erodible land, they already were in that no-till. We are introducing bison onto 200 acres of our prairie restoration, and that'll probably move on to 2,000 acres of bison here in the next few years. And I am looking for a bison ranch manager, because I do not want to do that myself. So if Takema, Nebraska seems like a great place for you to put down roots and manage a bison herd, let me know. Those lease agreements that are really focusing on regenerative practices, but also supporting the farmers and the tenants and utilizing cost shares and soil health monitoring. That is really where we're at Momentous. And Momentous is the family office for Omani and Jeannie Carson, and we invest in conscientious leaders and world-changing ideas. We focus our capital into those world-changing ideas and looking for talent in ways that we can transform the world. So whether you own 40 acres or 4,000 acres, we want you to know that regenerative agriculture is possible. We're not just doing this on our own. We're not just waving a magic wand and throwing a bunch of money. We're doing it just how farmers do it. And we invite you to come see how we're doing that. We want to inspire you to heal your land just as we are healing our land. So there is my contact information. You can contact me at Alexis at Momentous Family Office, or Alexis B. Stevens at outlook.com if you have questions or if you want to come see our operation. Always happy to take a phone call. You do have to leave a message, because if you're not in my phone, it's going straight to voicemail. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And I thought I saw things in the chat, so I didn't know if we had questions, but
Yeah, I'd love to kind of frame those questions really quick for you. Great presentation, Alexis. Enjoyed that. There was a question about growing other things. And, we talk about that a lot. We talk about whether or not that's the chicken or the egg, right? Is it that I'm growing things and then a market will come? A lot of farmers, I feel, are waiting for that market to be developed before they'll grow it. And so how do you frame that? One other part to that question would be, we know that growing a third crop is great for our soil health. It's great for the nitrogen reduction, for water quality. They've come out with that recently in the Iowa State studies and such. And so, what do you see as a potential to come up with a third crop, both for crop production, market development, and that water quality piece?
There's a lot in that. I think when you're looking at how am I going to change my business, not just in agriculture, but look at where's there a need. So what are people asking for? So right, last year it was eggs, right? I need eggs and I don't want to spend $7 for a dozen eggs. And that's my fault too, because I got off the farm, got rid of my chickens, and eggs skyrocketed. And I'm like, oh, what I do? So looking at where's that need, and you're right, there are so many things that we could grow. I've had people who are like, I'm going to grow organic oats. I'm going to do this or that, and there isn't a market because we've really monocultured agriculture, especially in Iowa. Um, there are people at Iowa State in the farm management team. Krista Hartsook is one that comes to mind that will help you to look at your niche market, help you find places where you can grow some sort of specialty crop and then find a market. They will help build your business plan. They'll do feasibility studies. They'll help you find investors. So it's really looking at like, what do people want right now? And so a lot of people looking at the Maha movement. Is there a way you can grow nutrient dense food? Is there a way that you can not just give me a steak, but give me a steak where you've changed the amino acid profile so that it has more protein or those things that people are looking at, those niche markets? That's what I would do if I was looking for a way to get out of that. And then looking at, third crops being great for soil health, and the studies show that. And when I run the model, we have this soil called gumbo. When I run those models and I'm like, okay, the way to fix gumbo is over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to do a crop rotation of corn, and then we're going to go in with alfalfa, and then we're going to do a cover crop with hairy vetch, and then we're going to come in with sunflowers, and then we are going to come back in with soybeans. And the farmer is like, no. And I'm like, I know, no, right? But it will fix the soil. And he's like, and how do I grow sunflowers? Where am I going to sell the
Yeah.
sunflowers? So it's the reality of, what the research says is amazing. The reality on paper is I'm going to do rye, and I'm going to do a corn, soybean, rye rotation. That's the best I can do in the market that I'm in. If I had infinite money, if I could really fix the soil, or if I was a government and I could do whatever I wanted, yeah, I have my 5-year plan. It's 60 pages.
I mean, I think you're right. So I feel like until there's a market developed, which we are stuck in this corn and soybeans, I would just be mindful that there are people like creating mills and such. Like the Aldo Leopold Award winner this year, he built a mill, and he's taking grain. It's just a very difficult thing to implement, and especially when you're trying to be fluid in your decision making. It's a lot to think about. So
Right. And I see that like with the cricket farmer, right? People probably thought she was crazy. But there are a lot of people out there that are doing something. Everybody thinks you're crazy. Don't listen to them. Don't listen to the noise.
So the other question was about the midterms, and will that get the House and Senate to move on the Farm Bill? And I just want to clarify my statement about the Farm Bill being expired. So the Farm Bill was developed in 2018. I believe it's like a 4-year thing. So they anticipate having new farm bills continually developed, and that just tells us what practices are going to be important, how different programs are going to be run, like your CRP and different priority programs for the Natural Resource Conservation Service. It also, I think, dictates food assistance. And so they did authorize some of those things in the big, beautiful bill. They also, whenever the Farm Bill expires, they have to continue to extend it. So they've continually extended the Farm Bill we have on hand for another year at a time as they continue to work on that. Now they do take input. It's great if you want to reach out to your legislators and let them know that you're excited about the next Farm Bill. I think it's a popular committee to be on and to be seen doing, because there is a lot of consensus with the Farm Bill. But depending on which administration sees that they can get their things inputted, I think it was very close to passing previously. And then now that the new administration is here, they really want to look at that, fine tune it with the way that they want to see policy for the future in the next 4 years. So I would say maybe in a year or two is my personal, like, I don't really know, but that would be my personal guess. This third question we've got is someone's asking if we can go back to your chart that compares the indexes, the one that AI created for you. I feel like that one was on like loans, maybe, or like interest rates. About
That one.
indexes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's your operating loan in the corn price.
Yeah. So, if we looked at that operating loan interest and for, oh gosh, 10 years or so, it was really, really low down there, 2 to 4%. And then we saw that upswing right here, right around in 2022, and especially in 24 and early 25. You kept getting that letter if you had an operating loan. I got that letter from Farm Credit, like felt like every month, but it obviously couldn't have been that often. But your rate went up 25. Your rate went up 0.25, and we're starting to see that come back down. Uh-oh, I didn't move around enough in the room, and my lights have
No.
turned off.
So is that chart just kind of showing like your so your flux in your corn price versus the flux to borrow money, like your rate of
Yes.
return, essentially?
Yes. So it's costing you more to borrow money while you're able to sell your crop at a lower price. And so what I'm trying to show you there is that that you don't have as easy of an opportunity to have liquidity. But the other thing I want to show you there is that when interest rates are low, corn prices and the economy, the ag economy does better. We tend to have higher prices. And then as interest rates get higher, we tend to see those ag prices come down. They're almost correlated with each other.
Okay.
So it's a double
Says
whammy.
thank you. She says thank you. So I guess what I've kind of learned from your session today is that you probably want to stay fluid, not making real impulse choices, but knowing how much it costs to produce your crop that year, what your inputs are, and where you need to make what your margin is when you decide to sell. Looking at those basis prices, what your options are to sell locally, and if you can get a better price somewhere, considering that. And with that, it's like, what are your cost realities? Where can you make reductions, and where can you look at maybe having, I guess I'll say this. I know that it was very popular last year to look at we've got this real technical equipment now, and it can tell you where you have a dip in yield. And so looking at those places in your field where you have a dip in yield, and it might be smarter to put that into a different program, put that little spot into CRP. What can you do here? Because the cost to produce there, and you're not getting anything out of it, you're losing money. So how can you mitigate where you're losing money and really round out your portfolio so that overall you're doing better?
Absolutely. Rethinking what the edge of the field is and taking that wetland out of production. We do not need to produce anymore. So
yeah, thinking about that. So I just wanted to thank you very much for attending. And I just went to a conference this past weekend, and one of the themes was weathered hands. And you mentioned being weathered several times in your talk, and it just made me think about that and how farmers have been through so many storms. You've done this before. You've seen up and downs in whatever industry it is, whether it's cattle, pigs, row crop. You've seen all these ups and downs. So I think it's just thinking about your operation, knowing where you can be fluid, and knowing where you might be able to make a reduction, like that nitrogen or something like that, and considering your community. where you can get help. You can always come to your local USDA office. The NRCS office has programs. Iowa State Extension is happy to help you look at your leases with your landowner, talk to you about what it really costs you to produce that crop. We have so many services out here to help. We've got lots of webinars like this. So does Iowa State. There's many opportunities to learn. And then, you talked about the regenerative agriculture. That's a new pilot program through the NRCS. We'd love to come talk to you about that. The application to apply is coming up this week. So if you're
You said
interested at
the
all in
15th,
applying,
right?
it's this week. You got to apply. And we don't know a ton about that program yet, but we do know a little bit about the practices, not the payment. So if you're thinking, hey, I bet I could reduce some of my nitrogen inputs, we can look at a nitrogen management plan for you, and you can get paid to help offset some of that transition to lowering those costs. So use your networks, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, family, landowners, tenants, check in on people, and this is going to be a storm to weather.
Got this. We've done it
Yeah.
before. We'll do
Yeah.
it again.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Alexis. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I really enjoy these talks.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.